Summons saw their debut back in Final Fantasy III, and such was the strength of their showing that ever since then they've appeared in every single mainline title in some shape or form, becoming some of the most iconic and popular elements of the Final Fantasy franchise. Often portrayed as divine beings, what helped summons to stand out was not just their ability to turn the tide in combat, but that they looked amazing while doing so. Summon sequences in themselves have become legendary due to how grandiose they have become, and although not all summons are there to deal damage, some would have extraordinary power. This would see them far exceed expectations, making them immensely advantageous and sought after for their ability to unleash devastating damage numbers, often bordering on game-breaking. And it's those summons that we're going to be running through today. But before we kick things off with a respected classic in Knights of the Round, a message from the sponsor of this video. Opera GX was launched during E3 2009, and it has carved a name for itself as a browser designed for gamers and fans of anime. There's a few reasons why this happened. First, the customization. You can enhance Opera GX using animated wallpapers, but you can also change your entire browsing experience by using GX mods. This adds a combination of animated wallpapers, background music, browser sounds, and keyboard sounds, and across official and community-created mods, there's over 2,000 available to choose from. You can also use the video pop-out feature to watch YouTube while keeping up to date with what's happening across various social media platforms. With the ability to listen to your favourite music via the GX player, and the ability to save some time by using the quick import tool, it means Opera GX provides useful utility in numerous ways. So, if this sounds interesting, we'd encourage you to check out Opera GX by clicking on the link in the description below. And why not share with us in the comments which anime you like to watch while you work or study. And with that, it's time to talk about summons. For clarification though, we won't be discussing summons who are the most powerful from a lore perspective. Instead, we're focusing on literal in-game damage. That does also mean that summons that possess special abilities like instant KO or revive have been excluded. We will also only be featuring one summon per game, and will be going in chronological order as opposed to damage order. So strap yourselves in as we run through some of the most powerful summons in the history of the Final Fantasy franchise. Final Fantasy VII featured some pretty punishing gameplay content, with the likes of Emerald Weapon and even the random encounters found within the Sunken Galnica serving as prime examples. On first glance, defeating the likes of Emerald Weapon would seem insurmountable, but the developers balanced things out through the inclusion of numerous mechanics, and one of the most famous would also be the most powerful summon in the entire game, Knights of the Round. But due to its strength, acquisition was not made easy. Knights of the Round could be found on the aptly named Round Island, but to get there, players would have to go through the lengthy process of obtaining a gold chocobo. It was only after completing this tedious side quest that players would realise the prize was worth the effort. Not only did Knights of the Round feature an incredible summon animation that was quite unlike anything that had ever been seen before in the franchise, but its damage output was off the scale. 13 medieval knights would be called forth, each dealing up to 9,999 damage. This would then be aided by each attack ignoring magic defense and reflect, and the output of each strike will be the equivalent of 5 times the base magic damage of the character who was using the summon. By the end of a standard summon sequence, when equipped by a character with high magic stats and paired with the MP Turbo materia, Knights of the Round could deal 129,987 points of damage. And this would be enough to instantly defeat most enemies in the game, save for some of the late game bosses and super bosses. Interestingly, in that regard, if Knights of the Round was used against Genova Synthesis, save for Sephiroth would actually receive an additional 80,000 HP. This further demonstrated that Knights of the Round was so powerful that certain buffs would even be applied to the final boss in order to balance out its near broken capabilities. At the time of release, this not only made Knights of the Round the most powerful base summon in Final Fantasy VII, but also the franchise as a whole, and that was only the beginning. Knights of the Round could be combined with numerous materia to enhance its damage output, and one of them, which would see 7 magic counter materia combined with 6 mine materia and the HP MP swap materia, would see Knights of the Round cast 7 times back to back. This then meant the summon had the potential to deal 909,909 damage in a single turn, which in the context of Final Fantasy VII was pretty incredible. Final Fantasy VIII would see summons integrated with the junction system, and this would see them have a direct impact on stat enhancement and the commands that could be performed. They also had their own HP, which could be used as a buffer for their associated player when being summoned, as well as character affinities that could change their damage output. As such, they had plenty of utility, but their primary role was, of course, dealing damage. And in this regard, none of the Guardian forces could hold a candle to Eden. Serving as the game's ultimate summon, Eden could be obtained via two methods. It could either be drawn from Ultima Weapon, which could be found within the difficult bonus dungeon known as the Deep Sea Reset Center, or it could be drawn from Tiamat in Ultima Seer's Castle at the end of the game. Eternal Breath would serve as Eden's ability, and it would deal huge amounts of non-elemental damage to all opponents, ignoring enemy spirit stats. But perhaps the most crucial element was that Eternal Breath could break the 9,999 soft damage cap. In its default form, Eternal Breath could deal considerable damage, but should all Guardian Force abilities be obtained as well as all the summon magic bonuses, with boost at its maximum level, Eternal Breath would be able to deal 60,000 damage, and this would make it one of the strongest single hit moves in the entire game. The only downside was that you'd have to sit through the summon animation, which clocked in at 72.6 seconds. Final Fantasy X would see the role of summons elevated in terms of both lore and gameplay. Most of the Aeons in Final Fantasy X will be acquired via story progression, and these would build out a solid toolkit for Yuna to call upon. But when it came to achieving those game-breaking damage values, the greatest potential would instead lie with the optionally obtainable Aeons. And amongst all of them, none would compare to the sheer might of Anima. Anima will be one of the three alternative Aeons alongside Yojimbo and the Mega Sisters, and to obtain, players would need to unlock and visit Barge Temple through the use of the hidden coordinates on the Fahrenheit. Additionally, they would then need to obtain all the destruction spheres from the Cloister of Trials. But after doing so, this would be seen as a fair price to pay, as Anima will be a major force to be reckoned with on the field of battle. Anima's stat growth will be tied to Yuna's own character progression, as well as the number of battle encounters triggered throughout a playthrough. And with high stats and careful manipulation, players could see Anima's overdrive, Oblivion, hitting numbers as high as 99,999 points of damage within the original Japanese and North American releases. This damage output would see even greater upheaval in the later international, PAL and HD versions of Final Fantasy X, as Oblivion was upgraded from dealing 1 hit to a whopping 16 hits. As such, this would see Anima's highest damage output increased to the colossal sum of 1,599,984 points of damage. This would surpass the Mega Sisters' Delta attack by a considerable margin, and would be a hefty hike up on the 909,909 damage seen with Knights of the Round in Final Fantasy VII. It should be noted that yes, Yojimbo can deliver an instant KO if a big enough sum of cash is handed over, allowing it to defeat any boss without breaking a sweat, including Penance. But if we're going on raw and consistent damage, then Zanmato has to be excluded, as no actual damage is delivered, it instead inflicts a status effect. Now, instead of featuring a familiar group of summons that were recurrent across the mainline series, Final Fantasy XII would instead pay reference to Evelician lore, elevating the status of the Lucavi into the role of Espers. Each of them will be categorized based on the number of mist gauge charges needed to summon them, with Espers such as Ultima and Zodiac placed in the highest tier. It would therefore be logical to assume that they would deal the most damage, but that wouldn't be the case. Instead, with some meticulous planning, players could reach damage values that far surpassed the ultimate Espers by using Zeromus, a level 2 Esper. Known as Zeromus the Condemner, this Esper was associated with the gravity element. It could be fought and subsequently recruited within a concealed chamber in the Still Shrine of Miriam that became accessible after defeating Judge Bergen. Though the legwork to obtain Zeromus was on par with plenty of the other common side quests in the game, it could become an unexpected force, as its ultimate attack, Big Bang, could deal huge amounts of damage. The damage output of Big Bang would be calculated by subtracting Zeromus' current HP from its maximum HP and then multiplying that value by 5. With this in mind, players could manipulate the damage output. To score high numbers, maximizing Zeromus' HP values by reaching level 99 would be imperative. Additionally, players could also apply the bubble status, which would double the maximum HP. To then make use of this unique damage calculation, Zeromus' HP would need to be reduced to 1, which could be achieved by using techniques such as Infuse. By employing these careful tactics, Zeromus' highest damage output would outclass even that of Zodiark's Final Eclipse and Shemhazai's Soul Purge, hitting 64,925 points of damage in the original version of Final Fantasy XII. But because Zeromus' maximum HP would triple in the Zodiac Age, the damage output of Big Bang could go much higher, all the way up to 284,520 points of damage. With the ability to dish out such high numbers, this would certainly make Zeromus' status as a level 2 Esper rather deceptive. For Crisis Core, summons were integrated into the digital Mindwave system. This meant it was no longer possible to choose which summon would aid in combat, as it was instead based on an intricate number of variables. However, should luck be on the player's side, one of the most satisfying DMW triples would see the successful summoning of Bahamut Fury, an entity that is widely acknowledged as the game's ultimate summon. To unlock Bahamut Fury, players would need to complete mission 856. This would see them fight against Bahamut Fury, and after it was defeated, it would be automatically added into the DMW system. It would then have the potential to appear when all 3 slots aligned to summon mode during a modulating phase, and by equipping the XIII materia, this would increase the chance of Bahamut Fury appearing. Should Bahamut Fury be chosen, it would then perform XIII, a move of considerable damage that would ignore spirit stats and deliver non-elemental damage to all targeted enemies. At DMW level 1, this move would have a power of 70, but at level 5, it would have a power of 96, and this opened the door up for an incredible amount of damage in relation to that particular game. Though Crisis Core had a soft damage cap of 9,999 hit points, certain accessories like Brutal, the Genji Glove and Divine Slayer would allow players to break the damage limit, raising the hard damage cap to 99,999 instead. In light of this, Bahamut Fury's XIII could potentially, at DMW level 5 and with Zack's level and stats fully maxed, exceed parameters and deliver a solid 99,999 points of damage with a single move. Final Fantasy XIII would see the role of summons evolve even further, as they became much more active participants in the battle system. Known as Eidolons, they would each be associated with a specific party member, and alongside having a small array of abilities, they would also be given access to Gestalt mode. This would see the respective Eidolon be synergized with a character, transforming into a vehicle or mount for them to ride upon. It was within this particular mode where the true power of each Eidolon would be showcased, but when it comes to determining just which Eidolon could wield the most power, none would surpass the King of Dragons himself, Bahamut. Like all Eidolons in Final Fantasy XIII, Bahamut could be obtained via story progression. It would serve as the end boss of Chapter 10 in the 5th arc, and defeating it would subsequently allow Fang to summon it from that point forward. In terms of combat prowess, Bahamut would deal non-elemental damage and boasted high attack and speed stats, and this would elevate him in terms of overall damage output. This damage could be further enhanced by maxing out Fang's Crystarium. This was because Eidolon's stats were essentially determined by its rank, which would be equivalent to a player character's Crystarium level plus the number of level 5 rolls achieved. When it came to dealing damage, Bahamut's full potential would be rooted in Gestalt mode, with Mega Flare being its strongest ability. And in order to maximize the power of this attack, the player would need to fill the Gestalt gauge before performing the move. With a fully maxed out Crystarium for Fang, careful paradigm manipulation, and getting the foe stagger bar as close to 999.99%, Bahamut's level 3 Mega Flare would be capable of inflicting numbers that broke the 99,999 damage cap, with it not uncommon for the total damage to exceed 300,000 points of damage. In light of this, Bahamut's Gestalt mode would be one of the best and most common ways for players to obtain Final Fantasy XIII's Limit Breaker achievement and trophy. That then brings us to our most recent powerful summon, who also happens to be the strongest on record. That summon is of course Ifrit from Final Fantasy XVI, but before we continue, please use this as a big spoiler warning For what you're about to hear, we'll be talking about endgame content, including the game's final boss. Final Fantasy XVI would have a central focus on Ifrit, with players able to take intimate control of this venerable summon in a way that had never been possible before. As the story progressed and Clive became more powerful and comfortable as the dominant of Ifrit, more and more abilities would awaken. In the initial sense, Ifrit would be able to deal decent damage, with standard strikes clocking in at the tens of thousands, and this would already be on par with some of the lower tier powerful summons we've already featured on this list. But as the story progressed and abilities such as Brimstone and Spitflare became available, the potential damage was taken onto a scale never seen before in the franchise. And in that regard, focus has to be placed on Spitflare. This ability will be unlocked during the fight against Bahamut, and it can be used by pressing R2 and triangle. It would see Ifrit launch a powerful beam attack that could disrupt projectiles, increase the stagger, and deal damage. Due to Spitflare being a multi-hit move with a strong finishing blow, this opened up the door for huge amounts of damage. But when used against an enemy that was staggered already, and with the stagger multiplier at its maximum, it could almost exceed 3 million points of damage. In this example here, a YouTuber called Yishu is using Spitflare against Ultima Risen on Ultimaniac difficulty. They initiated the move when the stagger bar was only at 1.3 times, as opposed to 1.5 times, but it still managed to deal 2,706,927 points of damage, making a significant contribution to the total stagger damage. If every strike had have happened at 1.5 times damage, then it could have dealt 2,954,485 points of damage. Not quite 3 million, but close enough. And with that, they were 7 of the most powerful summons in the history of Final Fantasy. How close have you been to maximizing their damage output? Please share in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Alright everyone, with that, this is Daryl signing out. As always, I'd like to give a big thank you to all of our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, especially Adam Aguilar, Arguan, Benjamin Snow, The Livestream, Gausin Dikajata, Gregory, Justin Dent, and Zukan TDK, who are super special Onion Knight supporters. And of course, a big thank you to everyone for watching this video. I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.